Hey, this is Kenny of Kenny's Audiophile Record Reviews. Thank you very much for viewing my video. As always, please like and subscribe. That would sincerely help me out. That'll help my channel out. In this video, I'm going to review two jazz fusion albums. One I think is super underrated. And I'm surprised I hadn't mentioned this album in more detail in previous videos. So I'm going to give that a little spotlight. And after that, I'm going to briefly mention and review another jazz album, just very briefly. And I also have a question for my audience who was around the era of the beginnings of jazz fusion. I would like your opinion on something. So I'm going to ask that question at the end of this video about jazz fusion. But I'm going to start with this album that was recorded in 1970, issued in 1971 by a jazz piano playing, a jazz keyboard playing master and legend, Joe Zawinul. And the name of the album, Zawinul, again issued on Atlantic Records in 1971, this jazz fusion record. Has a lot of great musicians on this album. I'll give you just a small sample size. First of all, you have Joe Zawinul and Herbie Hancock on keyboards. You know it's going to be great. George Davis, flute. Woody Shaw does a tremendous job on trumpet on this album. Earl Turbenton on soprano sax. Miroslav Vitos and Walter Booker on basses, Joe Chambers, Billy Hart, David Lee on percussion, and also you have Wayne Shorter, I think at least on one song, Hubert Laws at least on one song. Jack DeJohnette plays melodica on one song as well. So a lot of great musicians on this record. Also, each song has a caption under each song as more of a description aid to the title of the song. I'll show it to you. I hope it comes out on the video, but I think that's super cool. And also there are some brief notes or on the back from Miles Davis. I'll read you a brief sample size of his notes. One of them says, Zawinul is extending the thoughts that we had both had for years, and probably the thoughts that most so-called musicians have not been able to express. And he has further notes as well on the back of this album. But I'm going to start with the first song on this album. And Joe Zawinul, like I said, he was a master at piano. He played and keyboards. He played with Cannonball Adderley Quintet, Miles Davis, several other groups, co-founder of Weather Report. I'm going to talk about a Weather Report album in the second part of this video briefly. But the first song is called Dr. Honoris Causa. And I'm probably mispronouncing that, so I'm sorry. But the caption says, dedicated to Herbie Hancock for his honorary doctorate at Grinnell University in Des Moines, Iowa. Please forgive me about mispronouncing the name of that university. But I'm going to tell you something. That album, that song, if you listen to that song, and you should listen to this album on YouTube. And oh, by the way, as I always say in my videos, I don't play music on my videos because of copyright infringement issues. I don't want my video be taken down. But if you listen to that song, Dr. Honoris Causa, you would think you're listening to a song or a composition on the great album, Miles Davis album, In a Silent Way. That's how great that song is. It has the same compositional vibrant groove and direction as the songs on In a Silent Way. It was greatly well performed, greatly well done. It reminds me almost like 90% of In a Silent Way, maybe 10% of Bitches Brew. That's how great that song is. Especially the trumpet playing of, I believe Woody Shaw is playing trumpet on that song. And he just does an over-the-top tremendous job playing that trumpet on that song. You definitely want to check out that composition out, because a band is just came together in this creative energy, this creative ball of energy. It just sounded tremendous, that composition, Dr. Honoris Causa. And the next one is the song In a Silent Way. And the caption under that says, impressions of Joe Zawinul's days as a shepherd boy in Austria. And two, that song is obviously on the album In a Silent Way, the Joe Zawinul composition. And his take or his version on this album is beautifully well done and fabulously well performed on this album. On side 2, we have another song called His Last Journey. That's a very somber composition, a very somber song. I'll read the caption here. A tone poem reminiscent of his grandfather's funeral on a cold winter's day in an Austrian mountain village. And again, it's a somber composition, but that's good. I like that because it gives the album balance when you have songs like that on an album. It really does. And this album was very well put together in terms of the combination of the songs, the order of the songs. Again, that's a somber song, but it was very well done. The next song called Double Image, and I'll read the caption. A concept of what man thinks he is as opposed to what he really is. That's pretty deep. But on that song, again, that has the same vibe and groove of the songs on Miles Davis's In a Silent Way. And you can feel the band just come together and just put it together on that song Double Image. And the song Arrival in New York, which is 1 minute 59 seconds long, it's almost like a sound effects type of song or composition because it sounds like a huge boat. If you turn up your volume of your stereo system, it actually sounds great, in my opinion. Overall, this is a very great, super underrated jazz fusion album. I'm surprised I didn't talk about it in previous videos. Sound of 9, performance of 9. I just wish the percussion instruments had more of a forward and dominant place in the sound stage. But other than that, highly underrated jazz fusion album called Zawinul. One you should definitely check out by Joe Zawinul, one of the great jazz piano player and keyboard players who ever lived. And the next one, again, this one came out, I think, around May 1971. And I think this album, too, came out in May 1971, around that time frame. It's interesting that this Weather Report album came out almost at the exact same time, I believe. Again, this is an initial Weather Report album with Joe Zawinul on electric keyboards, acoustic piano, Wayne Shorter soprano sax, Miroslav Vitos on acoustic bass, electric bass, Alfonso Muzan drums. He has a voice on one song, and the great Aerto Moreira is on percussion on this album. I'm going to briefly talk about this because it's the very first Weather Report album, one that doesn't get a lot of props. This album really does a great job of setting the foundation of what was to come. I think their next studio album, it may have been, I think it's called I Sing the Body Electric. That could have been the next studio album. They may have had a live album in Japan after this one. But this really set a very nice early foundation for the group Weather Report. I'll show you the song listing and the back of the album first. And the song listing. Sorry if it's not coming out on the video. Apologize if it's too bright. But to me, the energy on this album and the more entertaining aspect of this album is on side 2. Especially the last song. It's called Eurydice. I'm probably mispronouncing that. It's spelled Eurydice. And again, on that particular song too, you can feel the band just come together and just jam in an excellent jazz fusion fashion on that particular song. That by far, in my opinion, is the best song in this album, and it's greatly done. And the song Tears, in that song you hear the voice of Alfonso Muzan. He's playing drums, and you hear his voice on that composition, and that's a great composition. So is the song Waterfalls on this one. This is a very nice early initial Weather Report album, in my opinion. If I would judge this album, again, this is an early Weather Report attempt. It's not the, Jaco Pastorius version of Weather Report. This is a very early version of Weather Report. I think the next studio album, I think Dom Mal of Sergio Mendes in Brazil, 66, was on percussion on that one. I think it could have been I Sing the Body Electric album, or maybe it was an album before that. I probably have the order mixed up. But again, this one I'm giving a sound of 8, a performance of 8. You should definitely check it out. I think my favorite Weather Report era is an era where the, Jaco Pastorius was on electric bass. I think that's my favorite Weather Report era. What is the greatest Weather Report album? That's going to might have to come out in a later video at a later time. But definitely check this one out. Weather Report, their initial album, issued in 1971 on Columbia Records. I think there's some notes back here by Clive Davis. I think Clive Davis was really pushing some of their artists to go into a more of an electric type of music. Miles Davis, he wanted Miles Davis to tour with some more of the popular, progressive rock bands at the time. He was trying to push the music to a younger audience. And maybe this was an attempt as well, because a lot of the albums on this label, if you notice during that era, like Tony Bennett, several other artists were trying to reach a more younger audience based on the songs they were singing. Some of the vocal jazz artists, they were trying to reach a more younger audience. So it was a very interesting era in music at that time. Weather Report, check it out if you haven't heard this version of Weather Report. The next question I like to ask my audience, there's a reason for this, and I'll get to that in a second, is when jazz fusion was first coming out, when it was first being issued, like around the era of Miles Davis's In a Silent Way, later on Bitches Brew, Chicory and Return to Forever, several, Herbie Hancock and his groups, and several other type of groups during that era. As that music was being issued, the early days of jazz fusion, those of you who were buying jazz records at that time, what did you honestly think of jazz fusion? The change of guard, the change in direction of jazz from traditional jazz, straight ahead jazz, bop, bebop, and it slowly progressed into more and more artists playing jazz and playing jazz fusion with electronic instruments infused into jazz and make it a more of a jazz rock type or jazz electronic type of marriage or fusion. What was your opinion when jazz fusion was initially coming out? Did you embrace it with open arms? Did you love the music? Did it take you several years to warm up and to start enjoying jazz fusion? Or did you never like jazz fusion? The reason I want to ask that question, when this album came out, and the Weather Report album came out, and the Silent Wake album came out, I was not buying jazz records at the time because I was simply too young. This came out when I was 10 years old. When I was 10 years old, I was listening to Stevie Wonder, the Beatles, the Doors, Marvin Gaye, Aretha Franklin. I was around jazz because my father listened to jazz. He liked more traditional jazz. I think my entry into jazz fusion is when Herbie Hancock's Headhunters album came out around 1973. But I didn't start buying jazz fusion till like I was 16. That would have been maybe 6 years after this album, after the formation of Weather Report, 5-6 years. So I was not buying records because I was too young around the early years of jazz fusion. But how did you out there, if you were buying records during that time and era, embrace jazz fusion? Did you embrace it with open arms? Were you hesitant? You were saying this jazz fusion is an example right here. I think that's the greatest jazz fusion album ever made, but some people in jazz, that was a shock to their system, and they never embraced Bitches Brew. So what was your opinion about the jazz fusion at that time and the change of jazz and the direction of that change from jazz into jazz fusion? Please leave your comments in the comment section below. Some of you more veteran music lovers who were buying records at that time, your opinion of jazz fusion at that time. That would be pretty interesting. Please leave your comments in the comment section below about that topic and the two records I presented in this video. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe. God bless, strong love, and as always, keep the peace worldwide.